and video heads, and this of course was a bad delay line.
Colin, do you think VHS is any good?
No, I've always thought Beta was a vastly better format. I couldn't see the point of VHS, really.
Oh well, you won't want this box from VHSisLife then.
VHSisLife? Hello. You'll have seen me working in the past on a piece of equipment that I'd built, which is a very rough piece of equipment designed to help demould tapes of various formats. I particularly use it for demoulding 8mm tapes, but it can also be useful for half-inch tapes, not just for demoulding, but for running the tape past something, which can help to clear the surface of the tape and make it so that you can run it without it jamming in a machine if the tape is in poor condition. Tape baking can help with improving the surface of the tape, but it does nothing for demoulding. And there's a lot of confusion around that. People think, oh, you know, tapes are mouldy, just throw them in the baking oven for a few hours and they'll come out fine. Well, it doesn't help at all. So this old rig I'd built, which consists of a couple of motors, one of them salvaged from a V2000 video recorder, and the base is salvaged from a Betamax rewinder, isn't ideal because though I have very good control over the speed, which is a good thing, I only have one motor I can control at a time, really. It has no way of disposing of any mould that comes off tapes, so it tends to get in the atmosphere. I've been using this thing to pull the mouldy spores out of the air and trap them in this filter and then blow the filter out, but that's not really ideal either. So don't really have a great solution there. And also people have asked me, oh, where could I buy such a piece of equipment? I need to demould tapes. Where could I get such a thing? Well, that's why I got excited about this. It's a piece of equipment from a business called VHSisLife. I don't think VHSisLife, I don't like VHS very much, but just the name, this is much more useful than just VHS. The designer of this is a chap called Tony. He has a YouTube channel and you really must go and have a look at that. Now I've ordered this with the optional extra vacuum cleaner attachment, so that will help get mould spores out of the air, but it doesn't completely do so because they will tend to sort of fly around as they come off the spools. So it helps, but it's you still need to clean up a little bit. Right, this has come all the way from USA, and of course it will have USA mains supplies in here, so that's something I'm going to have to deal with. VHSisLife mould cleaner, mould spelt the American way. And the VHSisLife machine here is what is made by Tony, and what he's doing is supplying these vacuum devices, which is a bought-in finished product. So it's not specifically designed for use with this, but it will certainly do the job nicely. Let's start by being a very good engineer and actually reading the instructions. So, sick of mouldy VHS tapes, then this is a machine for you, but it will do more than just VHS. And a rather wonderful sticker, I like that. Right, it's important to realise, of course, we're only demoulding tapes. It's not going to solve every problem with a tape. Mould and foreign particles, and that's true, it's not always just mould. Right, and he's pointing out that you shouldn't just clean the tape, you should also clean the reels and the interior of the shell. That's a good point, because they can often be contaminated as well. Do you know pneumatic tapes are particularly known for internal contamination? Not that this is specifically designed for pneumatic. I think it will potentially have the ability to do that in the future. So you can clean both sides of the tape through multiple passes. It's recommended to use soft cleaning pads. I don't know if we have any, and if we don't, that's going to be something we're going to have to sort out. 99% isopropyl alcohol, that's what I buy in. I've got plenty of that. So you set the direction switch and the speed, and put the tape on, mount the tape, and it tells you how to do that. But it's also included in the on his YouTube channel, so you can see that. And important, There's no auto stop at the end of this. Maybe that could be an enhancement in the future, but there is no auto stop as it stands, so you need to be with it. You don't just walk away and leave it. Yes, it has vacuum, but it won't keep 100% of the mould spores away from the air and surface. So keep ventilated and wear a mask. And you've seen me wearing face masks before when cleaning mouldy tapes. I think that's really important. The wonders of 3D printing. So we have the direction switch and speed control and off. Okay, these are where we sit the spools. I think these are designed to help stop the spools from wobbling about, and it's already come preloaded with some of the wipes on it. I don't know if we have any more, so that's potentially an issue. And here's the power supply for this, but this is where we hit our first small issue, because of course this is, well, it's 110 to 240 volt input, so actually I just need an adapter from that to UK, or I just replace the whole thing. What is it? It's 24 volt 1 amp, so it's a slightly higher voltage than most supplies. But let's see if I can find an adapter from that to a UK plug. And here is the vacuum cleaner side of it. So like I say, this is a bought-in product. We have some different adapters, and he's put them in this box for safety. So this is for 8mm, so we can change those out from the VHS spools. What others do we have? Beta, and it means beta. It's not just Betamax, but Betacam. Though whether the spool spacing's enough to allow us to fit large Betacam spools, well, we'll find out later. VHS-C, you only need one VHS-C because half of a VHS-C spool is standard and the other half is non-standard. So that's for the non-standard side. miniDV spools. Of course, this isn't just miniDV. This should apply for any DV. So that will be DVCAM, DVCPRO, large DV, any of those. So we have all the spool adapters we could ask for, apart from maybe some of the more obscure ones. Well, we don't have U-matic, and we don't have anything for obscure formats like V2000, N1500, 1700, things like that. Right, this is the hose to connect the vacuum system to the VHSisLife box, and it comes with some lights so that when you're using it to vacuum in just a small area, you can see what you're doing. But we won't be using those lights, at least not when it's connected to this. So we don't necessarily throw this away, but this isn't important to us right now. Not quite sure how to disconnect it. We'll find that out. Now, depending where I put this machine, it might be that we'll need a longer hose at some point, because I may end up putting this machine in the studio, and then the vacuum cleaner side of it might be on a different part of the desk. So we'll have to see how that goes. I could have had some fun with that. Right, here's the mains adapter for that. So that's 12 volt 2 amp. That's probably easier just to use a UK one and not worry about that one, because it's organising another mains adapter is a nuisance. But again, that will work at 240 volts, so it's only the mains adapters. You know, you only need to convert from these to UK plugs. You need to be a little bit careful, because I think they could get swapped, and you wouldn't want to put 24 volts into the vacuum cleaner. You wouldn't like that, I'm sure. Okay, here's the top of the vacuum cleaner. Okay, here's the vacuum cleaner base. So fan and light, and so we don't particularly need the light for what we're going to be using it for. And in here is a filter, which looks a bit like a car air filter. So that will fill up with spores and dirt, and we'll need blowing out and eventually replacing. But obviously we need to get it out of the wrapper. But yes, I can see how the LED wiring could be something of a nuisance to us when we have to clean the filter out. So maybe well, something you have to do when you're assembling this is push this firmly the hose firmly into the lid until it goes click. Like that. All the way round. Good. But do we have a way of mounting this firmly into the back of the VHSisLife machine? No, it seems to just sort of sit there. I've used a different 12 volt power supply for the fan, or the extract fan. So that's a standard CCTV type 12 volt power supply. And for the 24 volt, I've used a sort of shaver adapter from this to my isolation transformer down here, which is 240 volt. So let's start by seeing if we can just run the spools. VHSisLife box is powered up. Okay, so that's take up side. And now the supply side. Right, and the extract fan. Okay, there's no speed control, it just... Oh, why's it gone off? So they're sort of touch sensors, these things. It might be a little bit easier to switch them off. Oh, there are LEDs in there. There are very faint indicator LEDs there to tell you if you've got the LED or fan switched on. Right, I will switch the fan off for a moment because I don't need it at the moment because the tapes I'm going to be experimenting with are not actually mouldy. Right, so we'll start with a VHS tape, I think, and just show that we can polish to both sides of the tape, and then we'll work on some of the other formats. I'm also finding actually that these cables, the DC cables, are too short on both sides. So if they're actually the same connector, I think they are, yes, I think what we'll do is get some CCTV type 12 volt extension cables, so that we, well, it doesn't, even though it's on 24 volt, the cable's the same, so we can extend the power cable to both sides. Right, let's start with a VHS tape. Now, if you think it's some sort of drop the tape in and forget about it affair, it isn't. You have to take the tape out of the cassette. Now, there's another solution to this called a tape check machine, into which you insert the entire cassette, and it has a similar sort of cleaning cloth arrangement, and it can also actually tell you, sort of makes readings of how many dropouts there are on the tape. But tape check machines are unbelievably expensive, unbelievably heavy, and not easy to get in the UK. And considering you don't really need to know how many errors are left on the tape, there's nothing you can do about it anyway. You're actually just aiming to clean the tape to as well as can be cleaned. I think the tape check machines are less than as versatile as this is, and they also a lot more expensive, so I just think this is a better solution. Okay, so we're ready to load the tape on here, but the first thing we should do is to spray isopropyl alcohol onto the pad. A spray might be better than this squirter, but this squirter is what I have right now, so we'll use that. This particular tape is not mouldy. If we had a mouldy tape, you'd see the mould peeling off this as it feeds out. Most of it will be captured by the vacuum in these chambers, but some will fall upon the deck and you'll have to clean it up later. You could use the same vacuum cleaner for that. So let's get the tape set properly on here before we start winding it. We're going to go forward. Okay, so you'd start slowly like that until you're comfortable. Right, okay, we had a fault then. The tape folded over. Let me show you that. Look, we had a tape fold over. Why did that happen? Don't know. I think maybe I put too much alcohol on there, and that has caused a problem with the tape. I can smell the isopropyl alcohol on the tape, so I think that's what's happened. I think a bit less isopropyl alcohol is called for. And you could just leave that, or we could get some serious speed. And of course, we would normally have the fan on as well. So the upshot is it's quite noisy. Let's increase the speed. I don't think it's a good idea to go too fast, but just to prove the point, let's go too fast. Good. So we go slow towards the end, because if we don't go slow, we're going to hit the end of the tape and do that potentially. Snap the tape off the spool, right? There's plenty enough torque there to snap the tape right off the spool. So go slow at the end. Okay, that was good learning. Let's experiment with some other formats. So you'd want to repair that tape. Well, this is a gash one that's going in a bin anyway. But you'd want to reconnect that leader to the spool. While we've got our VHS hubs on here, let's try a format that is not VHS. This is the M2 format and is known for developing mould. Is a problem with this tape. So let's see if we can load that on the same spools. Let's use this to just rewind the tape. So tell you what we could do. We could go past the filter, but could we actually bypass that if we only want to do a rewind and not use the pad at all? Maybe. Let's give it a whirl. Just touching the back of the pad there. Okay, I want to do a little experiment. It's running at full speed. What happens if I switch it off? It can spool out some tape. Would that happen if it was properly being used on the pad? Probably less so. Let's try it. Okay, so instead of slowing down, we're just going to switch it off. Yes, a little bit. So really, the proper way to do that is to slow it down with the control. So that's better. Have it nice and slow when you get to the end, so don't rip it off the leader. That's better, isn't it? Okay, so we've demonstrated this works nicely with VHS and M2, which is a closely related format, but you do need to be watching the machine. You don't just walk away and leave it. Okay, let's go for VHS-C. Now, this is going to be a little bit more interesting. So we'll have to change one of the spools over to this. One of the many issues with VHS-C is that sometimes they are not really held together with screws. It'd be polite to call them fasteners. They're like screws with an extremely coarse thread, and they're just rammed in during manufacture, and then you can't get them out again. So let's find out if this is one of those tapes, and if it's the case, sometimes the only thing you can do is break the cassette open. So to that effect, you should always have some spare VHS-C shells, because you may have to break tapes apart. And indeed, I think this is one of those that's not screwed together. No, you can't take the screws out of these. They're not screws. Okay, I got one out, and I don't know if you can see, it's a super coarse thread. It's just about, it goes around that fastener about 2 or 3 times total in the length of it. So they're designed to go in and never come out, and they're just awful things. It makes you realise that VHS-C was not a format, it was just a bodge. Let's see if I can get the shell apart somehow. Okay, I've more or less got it apart, but this all goes to remind us how awful this format is, and therefore you could argue that it's so hard to put the tape back together again. There's an argument for not, and for just winding it onto VHS spools and running it in a VHS cassette, which you could do. But for the time being, let's persevere with this VHS-C nonsense. Right, now we need to find out how to change the spool. So there's a nice big screw there and there. I would argue it doesn't need to be done up that tight, so I don't need to get too carried away doing that up. Right, so VHS-C. Oh, so that fits just one way round. Like that. Good. Yeah, you might be able to fit it a bit higher up, but I think fundamentally the best thing to do is to miss the stabilizer off, because otherwise the stabilizer pushes the spool off its mount. So you could either mount it a bit higher, but then I'm not sure it really grips properly with the screw, maybe not. You could do it that way. Oh, that seems to work. That's okay, I guess. Or alternatively, just miss out the stabilizer for the VHS-C tape. Now, this is a little bit fiddly to fit this one because it mounts in a very different way to all the others. All the others, you just plonk the spool on the on the drive here, but the VHS-C is a bit awkward because of the design of VHS-C. So you have to mount this sort of semicircle into that gap on the tape spool. So you have to get this support here has to go through this slot. So it's just kind of one way round on this one. It's a little bit fiddlier than the other formats. And now if we want to drive forwards, then off we go. And I really do think it's as well to keep the speed down where you can. You go too fast, you can throw the spool off, especially when there's not much weight on it. This pad is dry at the moment, and it's probably not ideal running the pads dry. So, because the IPA will provide some sort of, lubricating effect, and I think this was a little bit too much. So I think the best solution is to use a small aerosol squirter. I'll go and get one. Okay, one of these quite readily available squirters. Right, so that wets this without completely drenching it. Okay. Good. Nice and controlled. What we would do now, actually, of course, if this had been a mouldy tape, is clean the spool. So it's worth cleaning top and bottom of the spools to get any more mould off those, otherwise it could go back onto the tape. And furthermore, of course, it's worth cleaning the guides inside the cassette to get any mould off those. And there's also this flexible guide on lots of formats, VHS, Beta and others. Some of that is a little bit hard to get to. You might have to actually remove one of the spools to get to that flexible guide fully. A little bit fiddly, that one. Okay, so once you've got rid of the mould from the inside of this and any other debris, there's some tape debris in that one, we could reassemble this cassette. I have done videos before where you see me assemble and dismantle cassettes. VHS-C is particularly fiddly, but this particular one is gash, so I'm not going to reassemble that right now. What we're going to do is go to another format. Beta. Right, so never mind VHSisLife. Beta is king. Let's load the Beta spools and do some work with Betamax and Betacam tapes. Right, domestic Betamax and professional Betacam in the small size, and also including digital Betacam and HD cam and other variants, are essentially the same tapes as far as we're concerned. So we'll do, I think, the Betamax tape in this size, and then we'll look at a larger Betacam tape in a moment. So these will hopefully sit nicely on there. That looks good. That works very well. And I think what's important here is this tape, this spool is not just free to spin. There is a drag on that. You can feel some tension in the tape, and that's important. It helps to peel the mould off the tape. If you do this with no back tension at all, the tape is much more likely to snap. If you want to increase the back tension, because you've got very mouldy tape, you could just put your thumb there, or conjure up some kind of braking mechanism to do the same thing. There's plenty of torque in the motor to do that, to handle that. And of course, if you were to invent some kind of auto stop, it would have to be VHS and beta compatible, which would be quite challenging, wouldn't it? Right, as we get towards the end, let's slow down. Good. And you'll see, of course, that beta has not an optical but a foil type end sensor, which is detected by a change in inductance. So a coil sits there and looks for a change in inductance caused by that metal foil. It's got nothing to do with the metal foil that you see on audio 8-track tapes, which work in a totally different way. No connection at all. I would like to remind Mr. Technology Connections, because he made a mistake about that on one of his videos. Right, so that's Betamax or small size Betacam. Let's look at large size Betacam. This machine's not really designed for that, and it may not work. So here we have a large size Betacam tape. This is 90-minute. So 2 big spools there. I don't think they're going to fit. I think they might collide with bits and pieces. Let's see how it goes. So here are the large spool sizes. Any chance at all? That one doesn't fit, but it's close. They're so close. Such a shame. Just millimeters away, I'd say. So I might say to Tony of VHSisLife, he could possibly just very slightly tweak a few dimensions to make this possible. Okay, it was never designed to do that, and it's not going to do that. So just be aware that though this thing can do Betacam, it can only do the small size Betacam. Right, we're just finishing off then with the beta-based formats, Betacam and Betamax. Going back actually to this Betamax tape, which I've not fully reassembled yet, you can see that the packing quality is good. So it's not full of ridges, which is a good thing. It means this whole system is pretty stable. The tape isn't riding up and down. So that's a good thing. Right, let's move on to another format. So let's look at 8mm. So this is Video 8, High 8, Digital 8, and some other sort of sub-formats like DTOS. And of course, computer tapes. So I spent an awful lot of my life dealing with mouldy 8mm tapes, because the problem is if you wind these quickly through high speed with no back tension, such as on a Sony BV8 rewinder, I have several of those. If it's mouldy, it will snap. At high speed with no back tension to support the tape, the mould will grab top or bottom edge of the tape and cause it to start tearing. And the tear will either be a clean snap if you're lucky, but more usually a long, thin snap which could last for quite a significant amount of time or distance, and therefore you lose a lot of material from the tape. And you have to splice that rubbish out and repair the tape with some sort of splicing block like this, and using proper splicing tape as well. If you use normal sellotape, that's bad news. So mould on 8mm tapes, I seem to spend an awful lot of my life dealing with that problem. Right, we're going to take this one apart. This is not a mouldy tape, but we're going to show the principles though. So we'll have to firstly change the spools over from beta to 8mm. think I might use my label printer to print some labels for these, so I can see at a glance what format each one is. Okay, loaded up with 8mm. Let's take the tape apart. Okay, so gently and carefully. They're quite a tight fit, so I don't think we need the spool stabilizers for this, because they're going to sit pretty flat, I think. Okay, let's go forwards on this one. Okay, so there's a decent amount of back tension there. A little bit of instability. Perhaps I need to wet the cloth a bit more. That is a good back tension. I think there's every chance that mould would tend to break off here rather than snap the tape. I could really use some mouldy tapes. The one day I need some mouldy tapes, I don't have any. And if you wanted more back tension, you could just put your finger there and apply some more back tension. Right, if you're dealing with mouldy 8mm tapes, I really recommend you keep the speed down. In my experience with 8mm, you don't get terribly much edge mould, so there won't be that much edge mould coming off the tape here into the vacuum cleaner. Most of it will come off here and land on the deck. I do wonder if maybe we could arrange for a bit more vacuum here. There might be a way of doing that. There might be a way of setting up a little bit more vacuum to clean up as the tape comes off the spools on one end or the other. Okay, you can go fast, but I would not recommend it. If you have a mouldy 8mm tape, I think you're going to snap it like this. It might be hard to get it very slow though. Would that be better or worse, do you think? I suspect that's going to be worse. Oh no, that's okay. It's quite controlled actually, I like that. And again, plenty of back tension, and that's cleaning the front surface of the tape. I quite like that. I think that could be a great way to demold tapes. I find when looking at mouldy 8mm tapes, if you get a tape that's like this, it's been parked like this for many years, I find the best way to go is towards the short side first. So if you've got a tape like this where you've got one fairly full and one fairly empty spool, and it's deeply mouldy, I will always go towards the short side, so in that direction first, demold that direction first, and then come back the other way. Just my method. One more to try is DV. Next we're working on miniDV. Actually this is high definition HDV. There can be the difficulty that certain miniDV tapes, I think it's primarily Panasonic, do not have screwed construction, they're a glued construction, which means if you have to take the spools out, you really just need a scrap shell to fit them in later, because you're just going to have to break the cassette apart. I do hate that sort of cheap construction. Okay, let's check that one out. Something's a bit stuck. Is that too much friction? That's not gone well. It's actually stretched my tape. Let's go on this front surface. I think there's one thing to learn there. If the tape doesn't move, don't just keep winding up the pressure. Find out if there's something you can do to sort the problem out. Don't just keep winding up the speed. Okay, that is working, but I think with such thin tape, it's piling up a little bit on the bottom edge of the take-up spool. I think perhaps there's just a little bit too much you know, that tension doesn't feel very much, the back tension there, but it's a little bit much for such a thin tape. Yeah, I'm finding that just a little bit too much drag for such a thin tape. I might do something crazy like go around the back edge here. Let me just try that. See if that feels a little bit happier. It's much the same, I think. It is working, but I think a bit of care with miniDV. Okay, it is working, but I think there's a little bit too much tension for the tape thickness. Okay, so I would suggest a bit of care with miniDV. There are other formats as well, of course, such as microMV. I imagine that would have even smaller spools, and of course we won't have any spools made up for that. And microMV is just so unmanageably small. If you've got mould on microMV, you're pretty much toast. So while we're working on DV, shall we have a look at its slightly bigger brother? So there's large DV and DVCAM and DVCPRO all in this size of cassette, and they're all essentially interchangeable. So it's got the same spool design. Let's see how that works on here. We need the spool stabilizers for these larger hubs. Let's see how it goes. Yes, that works. Again, I think you're at the limit because of the thickness of the tape, but yeah, it's okay. It is working. I have had mouldy miniDV tapes in the past where it was the surface that was a problem rather than the tape being glued together, like is often the case with 8mm. And this would actually have helped, I think, to have cleaned up the tape surface, because they kept clogging the heads of the player. It's fairly rare, I think, that problem, but it can happen. I think it's always worth remembering to switch it off that way and then switch this off here. And back again. I'm going at high speed here, and that is really actually very good. Good. So that's an extra format added. Large DV and DVCAM and DVCPRO. DVCPRO is unusual, and it has so many different tape sizes. So there's actually this slightly smaller one, which is roughly the same size as an 8mm tape. But again, those spools would fit on there no problem. And there's an even larger size, an extra large size tape. And again, I don't think there'd be any problem mounting them on there. I'm almost wondering, I had a lot of these tapes to erase recently. I still have, actually. And I've been erasing them with a machine, which is an expensive way to do it. So I wonder if I could use this machine to erase tapes. You could run the tapes past a magnet, but using a permanent magnet to erase tapes isn't ideal. There's a risk, I think, of magnetizing your deck. So what I think I would do is hook up something like a full width erase head from something like, well, I was thinking VHS, but more Betacam actually, and then put in a high energy AC signal through that erase head, and you could bulk erase tapes relatively quickly, apart from the fact you have to, of course, dismantle the cassettes first. But yeah, it's possible this could be used to also bulk erase tapes. Right, I'm going to go back to the VHS hubs, but ultimately I think I'm going to come up with some sort of storage solution for all these. Okay, let's have a quick look at these pads. So it's been just inserted like that. You can see that some of the gunjets come off the tapes we've been playing with. So it's folded into 4. So that's a square. It's not quite square, rectangular. I'm going to have to look up exactly what these pads are. If I get some information, I'll include it in the notes. So if you fold it into 4 like that, then you can get, I think, 8 uses out of it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then put the whole thing inside out and use the back edge to do another 4. So you get 8 passes out of that. And then to insert it, I think it's quite important to get this nicely seated in here, so it's flat against the front edge, because you don't want the tape to start riding up or down, especially with the thinner tapes like 8mm and DV. So we've demonstrated here how we can run all these different various formats through this machine. It does a good job. It's a little unfortunate I have not actually had any real mouldy tapes
Special
to run
delivery.
through it. Oh, right. Great. Let's have a look at these then. Right, these are 2 tapes that have come in today. This one definitely has some mould on it, and this one is absolutely awful. So we'll actually start with this really bad one. And I'll do what I mentioned previously. I'll run towards the short spool first, and then all the way back to the longer set of tape. And for this we'll definitely be using the vacuum cleaner. Let's see if we can clean this tape up. I will be wearing a face mask for this. I think it's really important. You can see here that there is mould on the surface of the tape where it's been left parked, and the old technique of just running through a video recorder to try to peel the mould off would do nothing for that. This machine can really help with that. It's on the back edge of the tape as well, as you can see. So I'll start by putting some IPA on the pads. Right, so I've loaded it on. I'm going to be running this way initially, doing the back face of the tape. So we'll need the vacuum cleaner. We'll be going that way, and we'll be going slowly. Let's see how it goes. Okay. You can see mould on the top edge of there, arriving at the wipe, but not then emerging on the other side. So it's been taken off by the wipe. It's either piling up on the wipe itself or being vacuumed away or landing at the bottom. There's a lot more mould going into this than is coming out the other side. It's really impressive. Right, it's arrived at the end. There was still some mould, you can see some there. Right, so sticking to the reverse face of the tape, I think I'm going to just change direction and see if we can go the other way. And already, looking at the top edge of the tape, you can see that part of the tape which has been cleaned. It's much, much cleaner on that far outer piece than it is on the bulk of the tape. And we can see the mould piling up there. It is definitely doing its job. And shortly, when we get past that short section again, we go on to the longer part of this. Right, you can see the mouldy part of this tape now. And it's been collected by the wipe. And the tape that's coming out the other side is much cleaner. Still not perfect, because we haven't done the front face yet. I'm quite inclined to keep the speed fairly low so that less of this mould gets into the atmosphere. Because if it runs really fast, it's more likely to spray around. You can see that mould is appearing on the deck, so you do need to be a bit careful. But a lot of it is being sucked away. Okay, we come to the end of that. This wipe has quite a lot of mould on it. Shake some of that off. I'm going to clean up a bit. Right, I've put some isopropyl alcohol on the pad, but before we do the front surface, I think it's important that we clean this spool before we wind the tape onto it. It's leaving marks, so I think maybe wipes would be better than cotton buds for that. Okay, so that's cleaned up a lot of the mould from the spool. Let's load it back onto the machine to do the front surface here. While that's happening, I'm going to clean up the inside of the cassette as well. Especially the guides that the tape is going to touch, because they will be mouldy. Okay, we've got to the end, but again we need to clean out the spool. There's plenty of mould in that. We don't want that getting back on the tape, or into the atmosphere, or inside my machine. Okay, that's pretty good, but I think it might be worth going back once or twice more to clean off any remaining residue. I think we can afford to go a little bit faster now that we're at the reasonably clean stage. Right, and we're going to go back one last time to do the front face of the tape. So it means I've done front and back twice. That is a much better job than you would have got by just running the tape through a junk VHS machine. Now I'm going to reassemble this and clean up this machine. I will say I find the noise a little bit much, so I almost wonder if some kind of ear protection might be a good idea if you're doing this a lot. Right, I'll reassemble that tape and I'll run it, and then I've got the other customer tape to do, which should be nowhere near as bad. Actually, this tape was worse than it looked. There's a lot of material coming off this, and of course a lot of it is landing on the deck, which also means it will get airborne if you're not careful. You can already see what a huge improvement it's made to that spool of tape. So I've cleaned up the deck a bit, because that was quite horrible after running that tape. I think you need a good supply of wipes and alcohol doing this work. Let's get back to the beginning of the tape, and this time we're going to be doing the front side of the tape. Well, those two tapes are pretty much unrecognisable from the condition they were in when they were supplied to me by the customer. I'm quite confident that they will give, well, reasonably good results now, and I don't think they would have if we just run them through a VHS machine a couple of times and hope for the best. This thing is worth its weight in gold. Well, I think you'll agree that's been a very successful piece of equipment. But I do have a few questions, so let's see if we can have a chat with the man behind VHSisLife, Tony Crouch. So hello Tony, I'm Colin. I do audio and video transfers on my YouTube channel, Video99 Co UK, and you are?
Tony Crouch, based here in Florida in the US. And I own and operate VHSisLife, right, and produce the VHSisLife cleaner that allows you to clean mold off of your media, video cassettes, and a number of other products that I put out as well.
Right, okay. Oh, tell me briefly about those then. What else do you do?
So, as you can tell from the name, VHSisLife, you know, VHS is really the primary focus of what I do under that brand name. And so if you're, if your viewers, and as you are already familiar, VHS is a media that has been out for decades, but not a lot has been done recently with new products around VHS. So, with the large community that has come about with I would say not a resurgence, but just a renewal of enjoyment with VHS movies. And there's a part of the community that likes to do customizing where they'll take the movie and they'll put it into a different shell, or they will make a new label for it, or make a new box cover, or cover art. So along with that, I decided to work with a company to start manufacturing new shells. The ones I currently have out are on my website, VHSisLife.com, and they are transparent. They're colored, transparent.
I've seen those. Yeah, they look quite nice.
Shells.
Yeah, yeah.
So along with the people that customize them, there's also a number of companies that are putting out, they're re-releasing or newly releasing movies.
Really?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, just recently, Witter Entertainment over here in the U.S. Released Terrifier 2 that went in Walmart, believe it or not.
Really?
So a large number of our Walmarts had a VHS tape in it for the first time in decades, or in a long time. I would say decades.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've also designed and am getting ready to release acrylic cases to house VHS tapes, big box tapes, a lot of the older tapes, but they'll be on an LED stand that'll light up from underneath.
Nice.
So yeah, just products mainly surrounding the VHS media.
Right. Oh, maybe you'll get into Betamax one day too. That would be nice.
Yeah, that's possible. That is possible. I do get a lot of requests for that. A lot of the Betamax folks have that same desire to do things with Betamax that we're doing with VHS.
Yeah, that would be good. So so your the reason you came by this product was more about restoring tapes so they could be used again, rather than, of course, from my perspective, which is getting tapes into a playable condition to play once. Right.
Yeah.
Your approach is more about getting the tapes into a good condition to restore them.
Well, quite honestly, So as we know, doing what you do and what I do, mode that accrues on a VHS tape or any magnetic media, the main concern with wanting to remove that off the mode is remove that off the tape is so that you can put that tape in a player, whatever VCR, that'll allow you to, at that point, then see if that media is still good or not, whether it's a one-time shot like you do by digitizing, or, maybe it's a movie that people want to play over and over.
Yeah.
But irregardless, we don't want to put a moldy tape into a VCR, because then we know that mold can contaminate the heads.
Yes.
Heads are tiny electronic pieces that, you don't just, my philosophy is the least amount of cleaning you have to do on a VCR head, the better, right?
Well, there's a couple of other things there, I think. Well, one is that the mold is typically on the edges of the tape. I mean, it can be the surface, but typically it's on the edges of the tape. And from there, it peels off onto the audio control block of VHS or Beta machine, and eventually gets to the point that the audio and/or control pulses fade away, and then you either lose tracking, or the sound is, for the linear sound, if not the hi-fi, it becomes muffled. And of course, the risk is that you'll clog the heads with the heads will, of course, traverse the edges of the tape as it's scanning, and they can pick up contaminant. And yes, you don't want to clog the heads. Cleaning heads is not always as simple as just stuffing a head cleaner tape in. Not the head cleaner tapes anymore anyway.
Right.
And you always risk damaging a head by cleaning them. And I once, a couple of years ago now, broke a head tip on a video recorder for which heads are totally unavailable, and the machine was worth somewhere between £1,000 and £2,000.
Wow.
And it was just a bad day, it was just...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the last thing you want to have to experience, especially when, hopefully a little preventative measures such as this machine would allow. So, what I tell everybody is this. This machine, or, there's other methods to clean. I'm not saying that my machine is the only way, but as a matter of fact, And I'll get into that in a minute as to why I created this machine. But regardless of how you clean a tape, the reality is cleaning a tape does not guarantee quality playback.
Of course.
Right? Because, we know that these tapes have been around, for decades. I mean, pneumatics were back in the 60s, right? So, you've got your VHS tapes, your Betamax tapes, all those tapes have been around for a long time. So they could have physical or digital damage without the presence of mold, right?
Yes.
What mode tells us is this. Mode on a tape tells us that tape has been improperly stored.
Absolutely. Yes.
So the goal is, let's clean it. Let's get all this mode off there so that we can feel comfortable putting it in our machines to then test to see if it's even going to play back well or not.
Right. So if there's mold contaminant over the surface of the tape, that can happen very often where the tape's been left parked. And if it wasn't rewound, then you'll have, a section that long of moldy tape. And this has a chance of cleaning that off, but it may not. And that section of tape may never be recoverable. And that section of tape may contaminate the heads every time it goes past, even if you've cleaned it on this. But at least there's a good chance of cleaning it. Oh, I should say, though, you talked about there are other ways, right? So one way, of course, is just put a tape into a machine. And I have a sacrificial machine for this. I'm sure everyone does, right? One chatty old linear mono VHS machine that I can just put a tape in and hit fast forward or play or picture search is what I often use, actually. And it will peel the mold off and spray it all over the inside of the machine. And at some point you have to take the machine out and blow it out. And it should be said that that's not necessarily a good thing. This mold, as I'm sure you're aware, is a safety hazard. It's a health hazard. I don't know any research that's ever been done about just how bad this white mold typically is, but you don't want to be breathing it in.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And I get asked that question because everybody now thinks, because I've created the machine, I'm a mold expert, and I'm not. But I've been asked that question over and over. And what I tell everybody is this: look, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. All I know is that I would not purposefully inhale that mold, nor would I want it floating in the air around my children, my pets, anything like that, which, it leads a lot into why I created the machine to start with.
Has the vacuum. I mean, that's the key thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. So, I used to clean tapes using an old VCR. What I found was that not only is it cumbersome to drag a VCR out, I would, hold a cloth against it while it was, fast forwarding and playing. Sometimes the machine would think, oh, the tape is bound up. So it would just, in the middle of that, try to eject the tape, and then, as you said, you got mold flying everywhere. So then I thought, there's got to be a better way, right? To do what we want to do without, or in a cleaner, more efficient and, quicker way. And that's what, I set about to design. And I really feel like, and the whole reason that I designed the machine the way I did was primarily so that, you could clean it while you were cleaning it, the vacuum, assuming you chose to purchase the vacuum, and I do sell it without the vacuum. I highly recommend it, but I know a lot of people don't, and that's their decision. But, the vacuum will, and I do have a video on my YouTube channel that shows.
I've seen it.
What you see with a vacuum and without a vacuum. And if you realize how much mold spores flies around without being vacuumed, I think it would give people a second thought on.
However, I would also say it's not a total cure for everything. And I've seen it on your videos, and it will appear on my video, which I think my viewers have just seen, of me demolding a horrible VHS tape. And a lot of mold peels off when it's coming off the spool and lands on.
Absolutely.
And so you really just need to keep the thing clean. And
absolutely,
in each pass, wipe it all down and get rid of that.
The nice thing about the way I designed it with the hole in the back and the hose is so that, and I played with a few different designs, but the reason I designed it without a clamp or a screw or connection was so that once you got done cleaning the tape, because you're absolutely right, the vacuum will not catch 100% of it by any means. It's going to catch most everything that comes off at the point of contact between the tape and pad. But, before or after that, it's going to get on your machine. It's going to get on your work environment. So the nice thing about the vacuum is you can literally just reach around, grab the hose, suck up the top of the machine or your workspace, and then just set it right back in there without having to unscrew or unclamp or anything like that. So if somebody purchases my machine and the vacuum, I get that asked a lot. Well, it just sits there. Yeah, when you turn the suction on, it actually, by design, creates enough suction that keeps itself in place. Yeah. And then when you disconnect it, you can just use it as a regular vacuum. So
yeah. Now you've supplied it to me with the VHS spindles, of course, and
right?
VHS-C, and a VHS-C only requires one spindle, of course, because it's only one of the spindles on the VHS-C cassette that's non-standard.
Right.
That's a fiddly one, isn't it? Just because of
it really was. That was a tricky one to get right, to be honest.
Yeah. And we've had, well, you've described it as miniDV, but of course it's DV.
Correct.
So I'll show
you
in a minute about DV. And beta, well, that's accurately placed. It's Betamax and Betacam, but as we'll discuss in a minute, only the small Betacam tapes.
Right.
But only just. And what else did you supply? 8mm. Now the thing about 8mm, I've done a YouTube video about demolding 8mm. I don't know if you've seen that, but actually I've done a couple where I've got my own rig that I threw together with the motor from a video recorder, which does exactly the same job. Okay, it allows you to control. I use a power supply and it allows me to control the rotation of that. And 8mm is particularly difficult because the trouble is, if you just pull on an 8mm tape that's moldy, it will snap because the mold is stronger than the tape.
Yeah, it's very delicate.
Yeah, unlike VHS, I mean, it can snap. Okay, I'm sure you've had VHS tape snap.
Yep.
But usually the mold will peel off before the tape snaps. But with 8mm, nearly always the tape will snap first, unless you handle it just right. And the way I found to solve that problem is to apply just the right amount, and that varies from one tape to another, of back tension. So you don't just let the tape run off the supply spool. You hold it back, and that tends to pull the tape straight as it comes off the pack and increases the chances of the mold breaking free rather than snagging on the edge of the tape and causing a tear.
Right.
Those tears on 8mm, and you may have seen it, it doesn't tend to be a quick tear. Very often it's a long tear and you lose a lot of length of tape, and of course it's all ruined. You can't do anything with it. You just have to splice it out.
Yeah, exactly.
So 8mm is a particular problem, and miniDV would potentially be the same.
Yeah.
So the only moldy 8mm, the only moldy miniDV tapes I've ever seen actually suffered from mold on the surface. So they weren't stuck together, but they had just contamination on the surface and would continuously foul the heads. And no amount of cleaning of the equipment I had at the time helped. This potentially could help. Because cleaning the surface of the tape, and that's really important.
Well, and you're absolutely right. There is each different form of media that you're cleaning with that machine is going to have its nuances for sure. And just in total transparency, when I designed the machine, I designed it obviously for VHS. And then also for Betamax, because they're very similar, They
were supposed to be the same format originally.
Yeah, exactly. So, they're both half-inch tapes, and the spindles are almost the same. They're just a little different. But, as I started to release this product, when I initially designed it, I designed it for myself. I wasn't even going to sell it.
Just like the thing I've got.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted something cool that worked the way I wanted it to work. Showed it to a buddy. He wanted one. He showed it to a few of his friends. The next thing you know,
business.
I've got a business I wasn't planning on. So, what came about with a lot of these other spindles was getting requests basically from customers saying, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? Several of those formats. I sold one to the Smithsonian Institute Archives Video Lab, and here in the U.S. So, which I was, very happy that they wanted to use my machine. But as you can imagine, the Smithsonian Institute has literally every format, that there is probably of tapes.
The ones I'll show you in a moment.
Yes, exactly. So they were I got requests to, make a spindle for all these different media types. And from my perspective, I was more than happy to do it and offer that as a way to basically fit that media on there. I don't promote it as a 8mm cleaner, right? Or a miniDV cleaner. It's a VHS and cleaner. These other spindles are, I hope they work, but they may not be the best.
I'm going to have to experiment with 8mm. I haven't got any mouldy 8mm tapes in yet. When I get some, I will experiment.
Sure.
It's always a matter of getting that back tension right, but it varies so much from one tape to another. What
I'm sure
make one tape snap will be just right for another tape.
Right.
And of course, what I can do, and what I was doing earlier when I was playing with it, is just put your finger on this spool that's supplying out to slightly increase the back tension. There's plenty of torque in the motor to handle that.
Right.
So put that on there and you can increase the back tension a bit. And it's never like there's no back tension. So if you put a mouldy tape, a mouldy 8mm tape into a rewinder, you can buy rewinders. I've got some Sony rewinders. There's no back tension at all to speak of. And you'll guarantee to snap the tape every time. But this, I feel, there's gears in there, isn't there? Because it's a geared motor.
Correct.
So there's always some back tension, which is a good thing, right? It helps increase the chances of the mould snapping before the tape.
Right.
Now, something I was going to mention, I'm sure you're aware of, is that there are other cleaners. There's a manufacturer call Tape Check.
Sure.
They are big and expensive, elaborate machines into which you put the whole cassette, so you don't have to despool, don't have to take it out of the case, which is handy from that point of view. Though, of course, the mold is going to go all over the inside of the cassette shell.
Right.
Not so good. But one of the things that machine's designed for, I think, is, well, those machines, there's a range of them, different formats. They're designed, I think, for making sure your tape is good quality for further reuse.
Correct.
That's really not what we're trying to do here, and I'm certainly not interested in that. So I don't need a readout of how many errors there are on the tape or anything like that. I just need the tape as clean as possible. And to leave the way those Tape Check machines clean the tape is pretty much the same as this. They have a pad and some IPA and a vacuum, and there you go. So, and you'd spend thousands of pounds on one format with that. And I even ended up with this ridiculous situation where I had contact with somebody who has a VHS Tape Check. I ended up putting a Betamax tape into a VHS shell just so that you could run it through the machine. How hopeless is that? So this blows all those problems away. It's really handy.
Absolutely. Well, and that was the reason, when I created the machine and developed the pricing on it, to be honest with you, I didn't price it as I was making a business out of it, right? So just total transparency.
Very fair price, isn't it?
As you can imagine, by time, all the parts and time and labor to put that in there, there's really, it's not a profit center, it's not, but I wanted to do this for the community. The fact that businesses such as yourself or institutions have picked up on it is great. I love it, but my main focus and goal was to make it affordable for the average home user. And, I've been rewarded greatly by messages from people that said, my parents just passed away. I found a bunch of our old VHS tapes, but they were full of mold. And with your machine, I was able just to clean them and, rewatch them. And so, you're absolutely right. And I looked, before I even designed this machine, I looked into Tape Checks and I thought, this is ridiculous. I'm not paying thousands of dollars for a machine like you. I didn't care if I had good sectors or bad sectors. I just wanted to get the mode off of it. And I see this all the time on Facebook groups. I see this all over, and people say, just, run it back and forth in a rewinder, run it back and forth. And tape checks do the same thing. If, here's my philosophy. If you don't remove the reels from the shell, then as you said, you're just smattering mold spores all over the inside of that tape, right? By taking the reels out, it allows you access to your empty reels. Once you move it from one direction to the other, you can clean the inside of your reels, you can clean the inside of your shell, especially if it's a tape you're going to keep and continue to play, and you're not worried about, or you are concerned about, making sure it's clean. Then, it gives you that opportunity to do that versus just knocking it off, sticking it back in your VCR, and you may or may not get all the mold off the tape by doing that. So
exactly, and then it could finish up in your machine. Right, let me show you a few formats. Some of these are interesting too. Firstly, I want to show you some formats that your machine covers and you may not be aware of it. Okay. Because I'll try. So you obviously have the miniDV spindles,
right?
But it also works on full-size DV.
Okay, good. So the miniDV spindle will cover all the DV formats?
Yep. So it works on that. So that's DVCAM, or it could also be large DV, or it could be DVCPRO medium size, because DVCPRO comes in 4 sizes.
Right.
So that's DVCAM size, it's often known as. Then the small DVCPRO, which is about the same size as an 8mm cassette, but is DV based. And that'll work just fine. So another format you may have never heard of, which your machine covers without you knowing about it. It's a professional format called M2. So a little bit of history. Whilst VHS was a domestic format and Betamax was a domestic format, professionally Beta went on to Betacam SP and digital Betacam and HD cam and such. Well, VHS tried to get in on the professional market as well, and always failed because Beta had the market sewn up in a complete reversal to the domestic situation. So this is M2 and is Panasonic's answer to Betacam SP. Shell is incompatible with VHS, but the spools are the same.
Oh, wow. Nice.
That'll work. At least it will for one of the tape sizes. Crazily, that came in 2 sizes. So there was a small size, which is kind of analogous to VHS-C, but incompatible with it. And only one of those spools would work with
I see.
VHS.
Yeah, I can see the other one is a smaller spool.
Smaller, but same general idea. So I don't know if any of the spools we have would work with that. So that's our M2 small tape. So you won't be able to handle that, probably.
Right.
Unless
somebody sends me one, then I can probably work on a spindle for it.
Another professional format. So Sony had the professional market sewn up, and the VHS camp were upset. So they come up with this, which is a digital tape, broadly based on VHS again. Again, incompatible, but with the same spindle. So this one's called D9 or Digital S. So again, that will work with VHS spindles. Now, we were talking briefly about U-matic the other day, weren't we? That you can handle U-matic small with some spindles. You say, was it today you've done the spindles?
I've got I did the test print today and tested it, and so far from my testing I've done so far, it's gonna be fine. So
but the difficulty is that most U-matic tapes are that size. Same spindles, but these physically will collide with parts of the deck, won't they?
Correct. As well as you know, by taking one apart, one spindle, the tape faces up, and the other one, the tape faces down. So when you try to set them on just a spindle, that even if there was space for it to fit, the one that's facing down, that tape would just fall off, right? So
Yes.
I have to create a basically a platter
Hmm.
for that reverse tape or
Oh, I
inverse
see.
tape. That tape would sit on a platter to keep it, from falling off.
Just
So
spooling off.
yeah,
Yes.
it's gonna take some, but I get a lot of requests because obviously not only in the UK but even here, I mean it was used widely for broadcast, and I've gotten a lot of requests for it. So I do have plans. Probably
Right.
won't be this year because I'm so busy right now with the amount of cleaners I'm
Yes.
building and on backlog. But probably my plan is next year to develop probably a machine that's just going to be strictly for that.
Oh,
So
right. So,
and,
right. So that'll be a bigger base.
yeah, in my mind, I sort of almost envision it more of a rectangular shape
Right.
because of the size of the reels.
Well, maybe that could be pneumatic, and maybe you could call that the large format machine because it could be pneumatic and Betacam. Now we mentioned Betacam. Of course, Betacam small. These are mechanically Betamax tapes.
Right.
They have different tape loaded in them, and of course it's an incompatible format, but mechanically it is all but a Betamax tape, and it is interchangeable. You could put that in a Betamax machine and it wouldn't know.
Okay.
But then there's the large tapes, and I had to play with one of these earlier today, and the spool is just a fraction too large, and it's colliding with the vacuum cleaner part, which it feels like it could have been engineered. If you'd known about this, you probably would have engineered it out because it's such a close thing.
Sure.
But maybe the pneumatic cleaner could do that too.
Yeah, it's entirely possible, and also the 7-inch 8 millimeter tapes. There's a 7-inch reel for 8 millimeter tape as well. The reel to reel.
Oh, open reel machines.
Yeah, the open reel. The right now my spindles work on the 3-inch, right?
Right.
But I know they make a 7-inch open reel. I think there's a 5 and a 7-inch, if I'm not mistaken.
Are we talking about the same thing here? This is videotape or film?
It would be basically, I guess it would be considered film.
Right.
But it's still a magnetic media.
Is it magnetic?
I think it is.
Cinefilm is optical, and that's what you get on those spools.
Okay. So the open reel, as I call it, I got a picture of it on my website.
Okay.
That the 8 millimeter and super 8 millimeter.
Yeah, that's optical.
That's optical. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. I had a request from a user, a customer, for those particular spools. So that's why I developed the spindles.
I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a different cleaning methodology for
optical
film
versus magnetic.
Yeah, I'd have to speak to my friend. There's a friend of mine called Chris Squires who runs SaveThoseMemories.co.uk. He's a cinefilm expert. I've done some YouTube videos with him.
Different company. There's a company that I just sold a machine to. Find out about that.
He has cleaning equipment and it's different.
But the customer requested, so I assume they knew what they were doing.
No, I'm not sure it's appropriate. But what might be appropriate is, I'm looking over here, I've got some open reel audio machines. These are 1/4 inch. I'll just grab a tape.
Okay.
So I'm literally taking it off the machine. So now the thing about these is, because it's an open reel format, you can wind it.
That's it.
No, this is not 8 millimeter. This is 1/4 inch.
Right.
It's 1/4 inch magnetic audio.
Right.
The machine naturally can spool anyway, but yes, you can get mold on these, and it has the potential to be useful for that. But this is a larger spool size, but it gets worse. Let me just grab another one. They go up to this 10.5 inch. Now professional. So this, you will have seen these in recording studios and stuff like that. It's the same 1/4 inch tape, but up to 10.5 inch spool size. You couldn't handle that because your machine would just be ridiculous, wouldn't it?
But no, it'd be too much for sure.
So I'll show you a couple more formats, 3 more formats, just to pique your interest.
This was called CVC from Technicolor Funai in the early 80s.
Okay.
So that's the spool size, but the gotcha here is that it's flangeless.
Oh, yeah. Like a cassette tape.
Yeah, yeah, even though it's video.
I
So
get
that
a
just is
lot
a
of
whole new problem,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Well, that's exactly why I do. I get a lot of people asking me to make a cassette tape adapter, and the very exact same reason. If flangeless, there's no way. Once you take that spool out, that tape just goes everywhere.
Yes, yes.
So it almost has to be cleaned within a shell or a. I've actually got some ideas on doing that, but I won't go into that. So yeah, flangeless is a whole different thing.
Well, there's another flangeless format for which mold can be a problem. That. So this is digital audio tape. You're looking like you've never seen this before.
Never, no.
It was quite popular for a while, actually, especially with studios, professionals, and also high-end domestic users. So it can give you better than CD quality on an audio cassette.
Oh wow.
So that was quite a thing in the 90s up to the early noughties. And I've had one of these. In fact, I've got it on my shelf over there, which is mouldy, and it needs something like this rig to demold it, but it's flangeless and thin.
Yeah, the I was actually, you always do your best thinking when, you're supposed to be going to sleep. That's when your brain kicks in. So I was laying in bed the other night and trying to go to sleep, but naturally my brain was just going and thinking about the cassette tape and the flangeless issue. It almost needs like a container that you would put over the spool, flip it over, then drop another part on top of it.
Yes.
To put it in its own flange, in other words.
Yes.
But still
Yes.
allow it to spool. So yeah, I haven't given up on it, but it's like the large U-matic. It's a whole different
Yes.
whole different thing.
Let me show you two more formats. You may have heard of this one, despite the fact it was never released in USA. You may have heard of V2000.
Yeah, I actually have one. A fellow UK citizen of yours is heading over to the States here in a few weeks, and they're sending me one of those as well as one of the N1500s.
Right, and that was the other one I was going to show you. So that actually isn't a problem because they have flanges. It's just a different spool design, but there's nothing particularly technically challenging.
Now that looks a little. What would you think on the diameter of that spool? Do you feel like it's going to work on the machine? Because I've never seen one.
VHS size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then yeah, it should.
And then you said, well, N1500, N1700, SVR. There was 3 formats under this.
Okay.
And you've got 2 different size spools there. And whether they would fit, it's going to be a close call.
Gotcha.
It's quite big.
Gotcha.
Because you've got one spool at the bottom and one spool at the top.
Right.
And these do go mouldy and really could benefit from this machine. It's not like, just the odd, tape in existence. This is one of the formats that could really benefit from cleaning. Oh, and this is another one where the spools run in opposite directions.
Okay.
Like U-matic.
So one faces down, one faces up then?
No, the problem here, it may not matter, but as this spool goes that way, the bottom spool goes the other way.
Yeah, that shouldn't matter because
That doesn't
really,
matter too much,
once you put it on there, as long
Usually
as you
doesn't
keep
care
it,
which way.
as long as you keep them on the same location, they're going to just spool. Yeah, that won't affect anything.
Okay, and they're flanged. So
It's it right. As long as they're flanged, that's the main thing.
it shouldn't be too hard then. It's just the physical size of it. And you mentioned these stabilizers.
Yep.
So they help a bit with the larger spool sizes, don't they?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. They pretty much have, so the issue with 3D printing is it is not exact, right? And I don't care what kind of printer you're using, it's just not an exact science. To get uniformity in a piece of plastic, you have to have it injection molded. which is very expensive, you know, and I looked into that, especially when you start doing multiple spindle types, because the mold for a spindle like that is anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 just for them to manufacture the mold.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about a per piece. And for me, with the little profit is I built this machine for, again, we have to remember I built this machine for myself just to use at home. So it just wasn't feasible, right? So 3D printing the spindles does not give the perfect however you want to say it, doesn't give it the perfect spin, right? It doesn't allow, and even with that, we know that these reels are not always they weren't perfectly manufactured either. Even a reel itself can have imperfections, warpage, whatever. I had a customer that was having issues that I worked with them on, and then found out his reel was warped. It wasn't anything to do with the machine. So what the collar, you know, just lucky that it worked out this way. The collar, you know, basically gives a separation of the physics, basically allows it to ride on a flat plane.
Yes.
And allows the spindle just to do the spinning. And the collar lets us it takes a lot of the wobble out of the.
Just keeps it planar. Yeah.
Yeah, just keeps it flat. The only time it's really not feasible or that you can't use it is like on a miniDV where the spool itself is smaller than the collar. So
yeah.
Well, I found it didn't work with VHS-C, so you can't use a collar because then it pushes the spool off the spindle and it'll just slip and bounce around. So.
Okay, all right. So the actual C part needs to be taller because I did test it, but not extensively, obviously. So yeah, so I just need to extend that up a little bit, which you know. Much. Yeah, that's not hard at all and easy to do, and glad you caught that. So, and fortunately for that, although you know shipping from here to there is a little pricey, but there may be something you'll want down the road. I can modify that, and include one.
It might be you could just send me the files, and I could print it on my own 3D printer.
Yeah, we could work something like that.
See if that works. It'd be interesting to try to print one of the spools on this. I'd like to try that. Yeah. I've only got a Da Vinci Mini, which is a fairly cheap thing, but yeah, it might be sufficient.
Okay.
The only other thing I had, of course, being in the UK, was issue with adapters. What's good is that they're 110 to 240 volts, so electrically that's fine. You just need to make an adapter. But also I found these cables a little bit short for what I was looking for. So what I've just done is ordered in some UK ones.
There you go.
12 volt and 24 volt. They're not hard to get. The 12 volt ones are typically used for CCTV anyway, for CCTV applications and lighting. They have the same plug on, don't they? I think there's both the vacuum cleaner and the. So you need to be a little careful. If you got them back to front, you'd stuff 24 volts into the vacuum cleaner, which would probably blow it up.
If I'm not mistaken, it basically will not let it run for more than a few seconds, and then it shuts itself off. And what happens is if you reverse them, if you put the 12 volt on the cleaner, it runs slower.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
nothing goes up.
So yeah, it won't hurt anything. It just your vacuum will just constantly shut off as soon as you turn it on, and your cleaner will run slower. So
okay.
Yeah, and the main reason I went with the 24 volt on the cleaner is that it just it's more efficient. It provides a more efficient output and allows the motors they'll last longer. You know, it's just a more efficient way to do it. But I couldn't find a 24 volt desktop vacuum that worked with it. So yeah, most of the time, you know, I've had a few instances where they got mixed up, and I always, hey, just make sure you got it on the right one. But you know, I've currently, as of today, I've got the cleaner in 9 different countries. So far, nobody's had an issue with finding a converter or in a.
Could I make a suggestion then for that one? Although you might not like it because it could cause you power problems, but how about if you were to have an outlet, a 12 volt outlet on the back of the VHSisLife to feed the vacuum cleaner? For everybody, that would be nicer and tidier. There'd be lots less cables hanging around then.
Sure.
So you just need a regulator to give you 12 volts out. But of course, then the 24 volt supply may need to be bigger.
Right.
But just an idea.
Yeah, it is an idea. And the reality is, and it's not a bad idea. And if I was doing, and I've discussed this, a few times with friends, that if I was commercially producing 100,000 units, there's several things I would do different. There's several modifications I would consider and want to do differently. For the most part, not for the most part, but other than my son helping me, I'm a one-man shop, right?
Yeah.
So everything I'm doing, and as I said, it's a hobby that's turned into a business. But and so unfortunately, I don't have a lot of room to profit-wise and to change things up. So I always look at things from this perspective because, oddly enough, we do live in a time that economically, even at $100, that cleaner is a decision for some people, whereas, for some people it may not be, for some it is. And my primary goal in releasing it to the public was I wanted it to be affordable.
Yes.
I wanted it to
really
work.
succeeded.
I wanted it to be a good tool for the VHS community as well as any other, but primarily for the VHS community, so that instead of just seeing a tape with mold on it and saying, oh, well, I'm just going to throw it in the trash, they would say, okay, let me try cleaning this. And where I feel like it's been successful is that I've made it justifiable financially for people to say, hey, I'll grab this cleaner. I've got 10 or 20 or 30 of these tapes, and instead of throwing them away, I'll try cleaning them instead.
Yes.
And so, with that comes a little bit of things that, wish could be different, but necessarily isn't viable financially to do so. But it's a great idea. But yeah, you're right. So
maybe if ever you do a Mark II or you do a large format one, I mean, if you do a large format one, it's quite easy to justify there because you can say the vacuum cleaner's compulsory with this one, right? So
I think it's just, I almost had. I really decided up front, do I even sell it without the vacuum, because I feel so strongly. And, that vacuum, as you said, it's an aftermarket. I didn't design the vacuum. It's just one that I found that provided the proper amount of suction without too much suction. It doesn't pull the tape all the way down if you leave it on. It's small format. It's lightweight, right? Has reusable filter. I mean, you can blow the filter out if you want to. So it fit what I wanted it to, and it was affordable because even though it's available off Amazon for anybody to purchase, I purchased them in bulk and then basically sell them for very little markup at all, because normally that vacuum on Amazon is $60 to $70.
Yeah.
And I sell it for $40, which is basically barely above what I'm paying for it. But again, I wanted to provide a way to encourage people to purchase the vacuum.
Yes.
And I felt like if I can offer it at, basically wholesale price, then that's going to allow them to better justify the purchase of the vacuum.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to I didn't want to force people to buy it. And,
and people might want to buy their own for their own reasons.
So,
it's possible somebody has one. I always give the caveat to test your vacuum because I had somebody say, oh, I got a shop vac. Well, you don't want to hook a shop vac up to it because
too much.
If you turn your tape off, if it's not spooling, but you have tape on there and your shop vac, it'll literally suck it down all the way through the chain. And then you're going to ruin your tape.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that it was a tool that was affordable, justifiable, and I've built and sold nearly 350 units to date, and I've got a waiting list. I've still got a waiting list of 300. Almost as many as I sell, I get that many.
I can guarantee that as a result of this video, you'll have plenty more orders, whether you want them or not.
Well, make sure your viewers know that, if they made it this far, they understand there is a wait list. I build about 30 a week. So, you're looking at about, as long as my wait list stays between 250 and 300, it's going to be a few months. Yeah. But as I've told people, people get excited about new toys, right? Everybody wants it now. But as I've said, we've went without this particular design for decades, right? So a few more months won't hurt, Right. Get on the wait list.
The whole kit that I bought, including UK shipping, with all the spindles and the vacuum cleaner, came in at around about £200 UK pounds. which is still highly affordable for what it does. It really is quite an achievement to get it in at that price.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate your taking time to review it and discuss it with me. And I just want this to be a good tool for anybody. It's not by any means the only tool you need in your arsenal, but it's a good tool to do a lot of the daily stuff that took us longer to do.
I think the one other tool we should mention, which can be for a different issue with tapes, is when tapes suffer from sticky shed syndrome. So they squeal through the machine or they're sticking to the deck, is to bake them. And I have mine's a scientific oven, but you can get incubators off Amazon and similar that run at around 50 Celsius. I put fans in mine as well. Somewhere between 12 and 24 hours of baking at 50 Celsius will usually get rid of the worst of sticky shed syndrome. If you've got things like Ampex pneumatic tapes, they're horrendous for sticky shed. Put that in for 24 hours and it'll often solve the problem. But it's not to say that, and this is a common mistake, people think that tape baking fixes all problems. And I get people saying, I've got mouldy tapes, just bake them. It won't help at all. It won't do anything for the mold.
As well as, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I don't bake tapes, but if I'm not mistaken, baking a tape is pretty much a workaround to allow you to digitize it, right? So most of the time, baking a tape is not a long-lasting solution.
Correct.
To, for instance, if you've got a VHS tape that you're wanting to, that does have sticky shed or any kind of tape, if you're going to bake it, then your best bet after that is to digitize that tape, because eventually that's going to just return, and it's not going to be a long-term solution for watching that tape over and over.
No.
There is no solution if the tape's degraded like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
and I tell people, I've had people, and this is just a good time to bring this up again, even though I mentioned it earlier. This machine simply cleans the mold off. It's not going to fix any physical or digital damage. And I've had people clean their tape and they put it in and they send me a video of it being staticky or the quality's bad. And I explained to them, that is what it is. This machine just to let you safely test that tape, but for the most part, I know I've got several of my customers that clean tapes, like, I don't want to say commercially, but because they buy and sell a lot of tapes. They've cleaned hundreds of tapes. And for the most part, I think most of the time, when you get the mold off and you've got a good clean shell, most of the time it's going to play about like it would have without the mold on it.
Yes. Typically you get dropouts at the very start. That's quite common. But you can at least get something that's recoverable at that point. And if it's covered in mold, you could damage your machine. You've got health aspects. There's all the all the good reasons. So I would like to say thank you very much indeed for your time, and for letting me get this. I think I Q jumped a bit with this one, didn't I?
A little bit.
A big thank you for that, and I wish you best of luck in the future, and let's keep in touch for other formats.
Absolutely, Colin. Appreciate your time.
Cheers.
Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, then. Bye for now. Cheers.
All right, thank you, bud.
Bye. Right, I'm going to be setting the machine up downstairs in my studio rather than up here in the workshop. And I'm very mindful of where I'm going to mount it. Not only because both the machine plus the vacuum cleaner add up to a fair amount of space, but also I don't want any risk of those mold spores getting it to a height that I could get affected by them. I know I'll be wearing a face mask when I'm using it, but even so, I think it's safer to have it slightly lower down. So I'm setting up a space for that. I'm also setting up what I've ordered in are 12 and 24 volt mains adapters for the UK plugs, rather than messing about with adapters from UK to USA and then the power supplies that came with it. Right, I'm sorry this video's been a bit long, as have the last couple I've done on different subjects. It's just that sometimes the content is that long, and I don't want to split a subject up into lots of short videos. So please bear with me on these few long videos I've done, but I do intend over the next few weeks and months perhaps to do some somewhat shorter videos as well. So do please come and join me with those. I'll do plenty more content on audio and video technology in the near future. Bye for now.